Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. I thought it was just my imagination until the messages started showing up on my bathroom mirror. Not elaborate messages, nothing you'd see in a horror movie. Just simple things like "Hi" or "I'm watching," scrawled in what looked like lipstick. I know, cliché, right? But that's exactly why I dismissed it at first. I figured I was just stressed, sleep-deprived, and maybe, subconsciously, wanting a little drama in my life. Let me backtrack a bit. I'm Maya, 26, single, and living in a fairly new apartment complex downtown. I'd been using a dating app called Connect for a few months, mostly swiping out of boredom. It was the usual mix of guys: gym selfies, blurry group photos, bios that were either painfully generic or trying way too hard to be clever. Then I matched with Daniel. Daniel was different. His profile was minimal: a close-up of his eyes, a picture of a cat, and the phrase, "looking for someone who appreciates the quiet moments." Intrigued, I messaged him. We hit it off immediately. He was witty, intelligent, and had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the world when we were talking. He wasn't conventionally attractive, not like the chiseled jawline types that flooded Connect. He had a kind face, warm eyes, and a genuine smile. And he actually listened when I talked, which, let's be honest, is a rare find in the dating world. We went on a few dates, coffee shops, art galleries, that new speakeasy everyone was raving about. He was charming, attentive, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. There was a comfort between us that I hadn't experienced with anyone else. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He made me laugh. He challenged my perspectives, and he made me feel seen. It was nice. Too nice, maybe. That's when the weirdness started. Small things at first. A nagging feeling that I was being watched. A sense of unease that would settle over me whenever I was alone in my apartment. I chalked it up to anxiety, a side effect of finally letting myself get close to someone after a string of disastrous relationships. Then came the bathroom mirror messages. The first time I saw it, "Hi" in messy red lipstick, I convinced myself I'd done it as a joke and simply forgotten. I'd been stressed at work, pulling late nights on a big project. Easy enough to dismiss. I cleaned it off and didn't think much of it. But then it happened again a few days later. "How are you?" Same lipstick, same messy scrawl. This time, I knew I hadn't written it. My heart started pounding. I checked the locks on my doors and windows, convinced someone had broken in. But everything was secure. No signs of forced entry. I started keeping a closer eye on things. I checked the locks obsessively, set up a camera to monitor my living room while I was at work, and even started sleeping with a small knife under my pillow. I felt ridiculous, like I was turning into some paranoid thriller protagonist. I didn't tell Daniel about it. I didn't want to scare him off. I was enjoying our time together, and I was afraid that revealing my growing paranoia would ruin everything. But the messages kept coming. They became more frequent, more personal. "You look beautiful today." "I like your hair down." "I know what you're thinking." Each one sent a fresh wave of terror through me. The camera I'd set up showed nothing. Just an empty living room. Day after day. I started to question my sanity. Was I sleepwalking? Was I losing my mind? One evening, Daniel came over for dinner. I cooked his favorite pasta dish, and we were having a nice time, laughing and talking. But the unease was still there, lurking beneath the surface. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. After dinner, I went to the bathroom to freshen up. That's when I saw it. "I'm here." The message was different this time. The lipstick was smeared, as if someone had written it in a hurry. And it wasn't on the mirror. It was on the inside of the shower door. I gasped, my breath catching in my throat. I felt a cold sweat break out on my skin. I backed away slowly, my eyes darting around the small room. Then I heard a noise, a soft creak coming from behind the shower curtain. My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. I reached for the door handle, my hand shaking violently. With a surge of adrenaline, I yanked the curtain open. Nothing. The shower was empty. The bathroom was empty. But then I looked down. On the floor, lying next to the drain, was a tube of lipstick. the same shade of red that was used to write the messages. And it was Daniel's. I stared at the lipstick, my mind reeling. It couldn't be. Daniel was kind, gentle, and caring. He wouldn't do this to me. But the evidence was right there, staring me in the face. I walked back into the living room, my legs feeling like lead. Daniel was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when I entered the room, a smile on his face. "Everything okay?" he asked. "You look pale." I couldn't speak. I just stood there, staring at him, the lipstick tube clutched in my hand. His smile faded. He stood up, his eyes narrowing. "What's that?" he asked, pointing to the tube in my hand. I held it out to him, my hand trembling. "Is this yours?" He looked at the lipstick, then back at me. A strange expression crossed his face. It wasn't fear, or guilt, or even surprise. It was amusement. "So, you found my little secret," he said, his voice low and smooth. My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" He chuckled, a chilling sound that sent shivers down my spine. I thought I was being subtle. Guess not. He took a step closer to me, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. "I've been watching you, Maya, for a long time. I knew from the moment I saw your profile on Connect that we were meant to be together." I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. "You're crazy." "Crazy in love," he corrected, his voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "I just wanted to show you how much I care, to let you know that I'm always there for you, always watching over you." He reached out to touch my face, but I flinched away. "Stay away from me." He sighed, his expression turning dark. "You're not making this easy, Maya. I just want us to be happy. But if you're going to resist, I guess I'll have to be more persuasive." He took another step closer, and I knew I was in danger. I had to get out of there. I turned and ran, heading for the front door. But he was too fast. He grabbed my arm, his grip like a vice. "Where do you think you're going?" he hissed. I struggled against his grip, but he was too strong. He dragged me back into the living room, throwing me onto the couch. He stood over me, his eyes filled with a terrifying mix of obsession and anger. "I'm not going to let you leave me, Maya. We belong together. You just don't realize it yet." He leaned down, his face inches from mine. I could smell his breath, stale and sweet. "I'm going to make you understand," he whispered. Just when I thought all hope was lost, there was a loud banging on the door. Daniel froze, his eyes widening in surprise. "Who could that be?" he muttered. The banging continued, louder and more insistent. "Open the door!" A voice shouted from outside. "Police! We know you're in there." Daniel's face contorted in a mask of rage. He glared at me, his eyes blazing with hatred. "This isn't over, Maya," he snarled. "I'll find you again." He turned and ran, disappearing into the hallway. The police burst through the door, guns drawn. They quickly secured the apartment, searching for Daniel. But he was gone. He'd vanished without a trace. I spent the next few hours talking to the police, recounting everything that had happened. They took the lipstick tube as evidence and assured me that they would do everything they could to find Daniel. I haven't seen Daniel since that night. The police never caught him. I moved out of my apartment, changed my phone number, and deleted all my social media accounts. I'm still terrified, constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if he's watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. I thought it was just my imagination until I realized that the scariest monsters aren't the ones hiding under your bed. They're the ones you invite into your life, the ones who seem so normal, so charming, so perfect. And sometimes, the only way to survive is to disappear completely. The coffee shop was buzzing with the usual Saturday morning energy. Lattes were being foamed, muffins were getting plucked from the pastry case, and sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the mismatched chairs and tables. It was exactly the kind of place I usually loved, cozy, local, and filled with the aroma of roasted beans. But today, my usual caffeine-fueled contentment was replaced with a gnawing anxiety. I was waiting for Liam. We'd matched on Hinge a week ago, and after a few days of witty banter, we decided to meet in person. His profile seemed promising, liked indie music, enjoyed hiking, and had a slightly dorky sense of humor that matched my own. We'd even bonded over our shared love for a ridiculously obscure documentary about competitive cheese sculpting. On paper, he was perfect, but as I nervously stirred my iced coffee, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was the way he'd insisted on this particular coffee shop, claiming it had the best cold brew in the city. Or maybe it was the vague way he described his job, simply saying he worked in research. Or maybe it was just my own predate jitters, amplifying every minor detail. He was 10 minutes late, which, under normal circumstances, wouldn't bother me. But today, it felt like an omen. I checked my phone for the 10th time in as many minutes, half expecting a last-minute cancellation text. Nothing. Just a few memes from my group chat and a reminder about my dentist appointment next week. Just as I was about to resign myself to being stood up, I saw him walk through the door. He looked different than his pictures. Not in a bad way, necessarily, but off. His hair was darker, his eyes were a more intense shade of blue, and he was taller than I'd imagined. He was wearing a long, dark coat, despite the mild weather, which seemed a little strange. "Sarah?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that sent a shiver down my spine. "Liam," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Sorry I'm late," he said, flashing a charming smile. "I got caught up with something at work." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't press him. We ordered our drinks. He got a black coffee, no sugar, no cream, and found a quiet corner table. The conversation started out smoothly enough. We talked about the cheese sculpting documentary. Turns out, he knew way more about the subject than I did. Our favorite hiking trails, and our mutual dislike for reality TV. He was intelligent, engaging, and surprisingly funny. But as the minutes ticked by, I started noticing little things that made me uneasy. He kept glancing around the coffee shop, like he was expecting someone to appear. He asked a lot of questions about my daily routine. What time I usually went to work, what route I took, if I had any roommates. And his gaze, it was intense, like he was trying to see right through me. I tried to steer the conversation away from personal topics, but he always managed to bring it back, subtly probing for more information. He asked about my family, my friends, my past relationships. Each question felt like a tiny pinprick, slowly deflating my sense of comfort. "So," he said, leaning forward, his eyes fixed on mine, "tell me about your apartment. Do you have a good security system?" The question caught me off guard. It's fine," I stammered. "Just the standard locks." "Why?" "Just curious," he replied, his smile unwavering. "I'm always interested in how people protect themselves." He chuckled, but it didn't sound like a joke. It sounded predatory. I suddenly felt claustrophobic, like the walls of the coffee shop were closing in on me. I needed to get out of there. "Well," I said, standing up abruptly, "this has been interesting, but I really need to get going. I have a thing." "A thing?" he repeated, his eyebrows raised. "Yes," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "A thing. With my cat. She's sick. I need to take her to the vet." It was a terrible excuse, but it was the best I could come up with on the spot. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that," he said, his voice laced with something I couldn't quite decipher. "I hope she feels better." "Thanks," I mumbled, backing away from the table. "I'll text you." I practically ran out of the coffee shop, gasping for air as I reached the sidewalk. I didn't stop running until I was safely inside my car, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the keys. I drove home as fast as I could, my eyes constantly darting to the rearview mirror, convinced that Liam was following me. When I got back to my apartment, I locked all the doors and windows, drew the curtains, and huddled on the couch, trying to calm my racing heart. I replayed the entire date in my head, searching for any clues I might have missed. I Googled his name, but nothing came up. No social media profiles, no professional websites, no trace of his existence anywhere online. It was like he was a ghost. That night, I barely slept. Every creak and groan of my apartment building sent shivers down my spine. I kept imagining Liam standing outside my window, watching me. The next morning, I went to the police station and reported the incident. I told them everything. The strange questions, the intense gaze, the lack of information about his background. They took my statement, but they didn't seem too concerned. "It sounds like you just had a bad date, ma'am," the officer said, his tone dismissive. "We can't investigate every awkward encounter on Hinge." I tried to explain that it was more than just awkward, that I genuinely felt threatened, but he just shrugged and told me to be careful who I met online. I left the police station feeling defeated and even more vulnerable. I knew I had to take matters into my own hands. I spent the next few days researching everything I could about online safety and personal security. I installed a security system in my apartment, changed my locks, and started carrying pepper spray with me everywhere I went. I also deleted all my dating profiles and vowed to never meet a stranger online again. But the feeling of unease lingered. I couldn't shake the image of Liam's piercing blue eyes, the way he had seemed to see right through me. I started having nightmares about him, vivid dreams where he was chasing me through dark alleys, his voice echoing in my ears. One evening, a few weeks after the disastrous date, I was walking home from work when I noticed a familiar figure standing across the street. It was Liam. He was wearing the same dark coat, his face partially obscured by the shadows. He didn't say anything, didn't make any sudden moves. He just stood there watching me. My blood ran cold. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was paralyzed with fear. After what felt like an eternity, he slowly turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I didn't see him again after that, but I knew he was still out there somewhere, and I knew that I would never truly feel safe again. This wasn't just a bad date. This was a glimpse into something dark and dangerous, and it had changed me forever. This event taught me a lesson that I'll never forget. Trust your instincts, even if they seem irrational. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And don't be afraid to prioritize your safety, even if it means being rude or dramatic. Because in the end, your life is worth more than politeness. I often think about what would have happened if I hadn't listened to my gut that day. What if I had agreed to go for a walk with him? What if I had told him more about my apartment? The thought sends shivers down my spine. I'm lucky to be alive, and I'm determined to never let something like that happen again. Now, when I go on dates, I meet in public places, tell a friend where I'm going, and share my location with them. I also do a thorough background check on anyone I'm considering meeting in person. It might seem like overkill, but it's a small price to pay for peace of mind. The world can be a scary place, especially when you're navigating the world of online dating. But by being cautious, informed, and trusting your instincts, you can protect yourself from the darkness that lurks beneath the surface. The experience was horrible, but it has made me a stronger and more cautious person. I still remember every detail. Okay, so dating apps, right? Everyone uses them. Or at least, everyone I know does. It's the norm. I mean, where else are you supposed to meet people these days? Bars? Grocery stores? Feels a little cliché, you know? Anyway, I'd been on and off Bumble for a while, mostly unsuccessful. A few dates here and there, nothing that really stuck. Then I matched with him. Liam. His profile was different. Not in a weird, red flag kind of way, but just understated. He had maybe 3 pictures, all pretty casual. One of him hiking, one with his dog, big plus for me, I love dogs, and one blurry one from a concert. No shirtless gym selfies, no pictures with a bunch of other girls. His bio was short and sweet. Software engineer. Loves the outdoors, live music, and good coffee. Looking for someone to explore the city with. Seemed normal enough, right? We started chatting, and he was actually really easy to talk to. He wasn't overly flirty or pushy, just genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about our jobs, our hobbies, our favorite movies. He was smart, funny, and surprisingly down-to-earth for a software engineer. No offense to any software engineers out there. After a few days of texting, he asked me out for coffee. Again, seemed normal, right? The coffee date went great. He was even more attractive in person, and the conversation flowed easily. We talked for hours, and I felt like I could actually be myself around him. He was a good listener, and he made me laugh. He seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, which is a rare quality these days. We made plans for a second date, a hike in the nearby mountains. I was actually excited. I hadn't felt this way about someone in a long time. The hike was even better than the coffee date. The weather was perfect, the scenery was beautiful, and Liam was perfect. He was attentive, funny, and adventurous. We reached the summit and sat down to enjoy the view. We talked about our dreams, our fears, our hopes for the future. It felt like we were connecting on a deeper level. That's when things started to get weird. He started talking about his past. He told me about his childhood, his family, his previous relationships. It was all pretty standard stuff, until he started talking about his ex. He said she had cheated on him, and it had really messed him up. He said he had trust issues, and that he was afraid of getting hurt again. I felt bad for him. I've been there. We have all been there. I tried to reassure him, told him that not everyone is like that, and that he deserved to be happy. Then he said something that made me pause. He said, "I just want someone who will be loyal to me, someone who will never leave me." It was the way he said it, almost pleading. I started to feel a little uneasy, but I brushed it off, figured he was just being vulnerable. The next few dates were similar. He was always incredibly attentive and affectionate, but he also kept bringing up his ex and his trust issues. He started asking me questions about my past relationships, wanting to know every detail. He wanted to know if I had ever cheated, if I had ever lied, if I had ever hurt anyone. It felt like he was constantly testing me, trying to see if I was worthy of his love. I tried to be understanding, but it was starting to wear me down. I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, afraid of saying or doing something that would trigger his insecurities. I started to dread our dates. One night, we were at my apartment watching a movie. I got up to go to the bathroom, and when I came back, he was going through my phone. He didn't even try to hide it. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and innocent. "I was just curious," he said. "I wanted to see who you were talking to. You can't just go through my phone." I said, my anger rising. "That's a huge invasion of privacy." "I just wanted to make sure you weren't talking to anyone else," he said, his voice pleading. "I'm scared of getting hurt again." That was it. I snapped. "I can't do this anymore," I said. "I can't keep dealing with your insecurities and your paranoia. I need someone who trusts me." He started to cry. "Please don't leave me," he said. "I'll change, I promise. Just give me another chance." I stood my ground. "I'm sorry, Liam," I said, "but this isn't healthy. I need to end this." I ended things then and there. He was devastated, begging me to reconsider. I told him it was over and asked him to leave. He left, but not before sending me a torrent of text messages, accusing me of being just like his ex. I blocked him on everything and tried to move on, but the experience shook me up more than I thought it would. I started questioning my judgment, wondering if I had missed some red flags earlier on. I started doubting my ability to trust anyone. I felt like I had dodged a bullet, but the experience left a mark. A few weeks later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Hello," I said. "Is this my name?" A woman's voice asked. "Yes," I said. "Who is this?" "My name is Sarah," she said. "I'm Liam's ex-girlfriend." My heart sank. "What do you want?" I asked. "I just wanted to warn you about him," she said. "He's not who he seems." "I know," I said. "I figured that out." "He's obsessed with control," she said. "He'll try to isolate you from your friends and family. He'll try to manipulate you and gaslight you. He'll do anything to keep you from leaving him." I felt a chill run down my spine. "How do you know all this?" I asked. "Because I lived it," she said. "It took me years to get away from him. I just don't want to see anyone else go through what I went through." She went on to tell me about the extent of his behavior, how he would track her phone, how he would show up at her work unannounced, how he would constantly accuse her of cheating. It was chilling. "Thank you for telling me all this," I said, my voice trembling. "Be careful," she said. "He doesn't like being rejected. He might try to come after you." I hung up the phone, my mind racing. I felt like I was in a thriller movie. I started to wonder if I was in danger. I immediately went to the police. I told them everything about Liam's behavior, Sarah's warning. They took my statement, but they said there wasn't much they could do unless he actually threatened me or harmed me. They advised me to get a restraining order. I got a restraining order against Liam. It made me feel a little safer, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me. For weeks, I was on edge. I jumped at every sound. I avoided going out alone. I felt like I was being followed. Then, one night, I was walking home from work when I saw him. He was standing across the street, staring at me. He didn't say anything, didn't make a move. He just stood there, watching. I froze. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I felt like I was paralyzed with fear. He had a smirk on his face, just watching me feel powerless. Finally, I managed to break free. I turned and ran as fast as I could, not stopping until I reached my apartment. I locked the door, bolted the windows, and hid in my bedroom, shaking like a leaf. I was terrified. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up all night, watching the windows, waiting for him to come. He never did. I moved a few weeks later. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not even my closest friends. I changed my phone number, deleted my social media accounts, and started a new life in a new city. It's been a few years since then, and I haven't seen or heard from Liam since. But I still think about him sometimes. I still have nightmares about him. I'm still shaken up from the experience. I'm more cautious now, more guarded. I'm hesitant to trust anyone, especially on dating apps. The whole experience just showed me how easily things can go wrong, how easily someone can hide their true self. I've sworn off dating apps altogether. I don't want to be put in that vulnerable position again. I think I'm going to just let fate run its course and meet someone organically. It's just safer that way. I guess the moral of the story is, be careful who you meet online. Trust your instincts. And don't ignore the red flags, no matter how charming someone may seem. Because sometimes the perfect person is anything but. Okay, so I'm Maya. Or, well, I was Maya before everything. Before I met him. Before I realized that sometimes your gut screams for a reason. Before dating apps became the enemy. I'd been single for, like, ever. Okay, maybe not ever, but long enough to feel like I was wearing the Forever Alone label like a cheap perfume. My friends were all coupled up, posting engagement photos and baby announcements, and I was swiping left on guys who posed with tigers or bragged about their entrepreneurial spirit. Read pyramid schemes. So, yeah, I was ready for a change. I dove headfirst into the online dating pool, convinced that this time would be different. I revamped my profile, got some decent pictures taken, thanks, Instagram filters, and started swiping with renewed enthusiasm. I even lowered my standards a little bit. That's when I matched with Alex. He was different. Not in a bad way, at first. He wasn't your typical gym rat or finance bro. He was a writer, or at least that's what he said. He had this brooding, artistic vibe that I found surprisingly attractive. He quoted poetry, talked about existentialism, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. Our conversations were stimulating, engaging, and a welcome change from the usual, hey, wanna grab coffee? We texted for a couple of weeks before finally deciding to meet up. He suggested this little hole-in-the-wall bookstore cafe downtown. It seemed quirky and cool, and I was excited. I spent hours agonizing over what to wear, finally settling on a vintage dress that I hoped struck the right balance between effortless and trying too hard. The first few dates were amazing. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, and made me feel like I was the only person in the world. He was charming, witty, and genuinely seemed to see me, not just the curated version I presented online. He'd bring me little gifts, a rare edition of my favorite book, a vintage postcard from a city I'd always dreamed of visiting, a single, perfect rose. He was attentive, romantic, and everything I thought I wanted in a partner. I fell hard. Like, embarrassingly, head over heels. Can't eat, can't sleep kind of hard. I started picturing a future with him, holidays together, meeting his family, maybe even a wedding. Looking back, I see the red flags were there all along, subtle at first, like little whispers of doubt in the back of my mind. But I was so blinded by infatuation that I ignored them, rationalized them, or simply didn't want to see them. He was secretive about his past, always vague about his family and friends. He claimed he was a lone wolf type, preferring his own company to social gatherings. He avoided taking pictures, saying he didn't like being captured. And he had this intense, almost obsessive focus on me, wanting to know everything I was doing, who I was with, and where I was going. But I chalked it up to him being a complex, introverted artist. I told myself it was endearing that he was so interested in me. I was flattered by his attention, even when it felt a little suffocating. The moment I knew something was wrong was when he started showing up unannounced. It started innocently enough. He'd happen to be in my neighborhood and suggest we grab a drink. Or he'd, accidentally, run into me at my favorite coffee shop. I thought it was cute, a sign that he was thinking about me, that he wanted to spend every possible moment together. Then it escalated. One evening, I was having dinner with my friends Sarah and Emily at this Italian place near my apartment. I hadn't seen them in weeks, and I was excited to catch up. We were laughing and gossiping, enjoying the food and the company, when I glanced up and saw Alex standing outside the restaurant, staring at me through the window. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't waving. He was just watching. His expression was unreadable, but there was something unsettling about his gaze. It felt possessive, intense, and just plain wrong. I froze, my smile faltering. Sarah and Emily noticed something was off and asked what was wrong. I stammered, trying to explain, but I didn't want to scare them. I told them it was just a friend, that I'd be right back. I excused myself and went outside. Alex was still standing there, his eyes fixed on me. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. He shrugged, feigning innocence. "Oh, hey, I was just in the area and thought I'd see if you were around." "You just happen to be in the area?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "At this restaurant? While I'm having dinner with my friends." He shifted his weight, avoiding my gaze. "Yeah, well, I missed you. I wanted to see you." I didn't buy it for a second. This wasn't a coincidence. This was something else. "Alex, you can't just show up like this," I said, my voice hardening. "I'm having dinner with my friends. I need you to leave." His expression darkened. "So, you'd rather spend time with them than with me?" "That's not the point," I said, exasperated. "I need space. I need to have a life outside of you." He stepped closer, invading my personal space. "But I am your life, Maya. We're meant to be together. I'm just trying to show you how much I care." His words sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't love. This was obsession. "Alex, please," I pleaded. "Just go." He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes burning with an intensity that scared me. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. I stood there for a few minutes, watching him disappear into the crowd, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt shaken, violated, and deeply, profoundly afraid. I went back inside and tried to act normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time the door opened, I jumped. Every time someone walked past the window, I flinched. I couldn't focus on the conversation. I couldn't eat my food. I just wanted to go home, lock the doors, and hide. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the scene in my head, over and over again. I realized that Alex's behavior wasn't romantic or endearing. It was controlling, manipulative, and potentially dangerous. I knew I had to end things. The next day, I texted him, telling him that I needed to talk. He responded immediately, eager to see me. I suggested meeting at a public park, in broad daylight, surrounded by people. I didn't want to be alone with him. When he arrived, he was wearing the same intense expression he'd had the night before. He didn't say hello. He just stared at me, waiting for me to speak. "Alex," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be in this relationship. It's not healthy." His face contorted in anger. "What are you talking about? What did I do?" "It's not about what you did," I said. "It's about who you are. You're too intense, too controlling. I need space, and you won't give it to me." He scoffed. "Space? What do you need space from?" "Me. I'm the best thing that's ever happened to you." "That's not true," I said, my voice rising. "You're suffocating me. I can't breathe." He grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "Don't say that. Don't you dare say that. I love you more than anything in the world." "Let go of me," I said, struggling to free myself. He tightened his grip. "I'm not letting you go. You're mine. You belong to me." I screamed. People turned to look. A couple walking by stopped and asked if I was okay. Alex released my arm, his eyes wide with panic. "I didn't mean to," he stammered. I just don't want to lose you." "It's over, Alex," I said, my voice shaking. "Stay away from me." I turned and ran, as fast as I could, not stopping until I reached my apartment building. I locked the doors, drew the curtains, and collapsed on the couch, sobbing. I knew I had to report him. I knew I had to protect myself. But I was terrified. What if he came after me? What if he hurt me? I spent the next few weeks living in fear, constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every sound. I changed my phone number, deleted my social media accounts, and installed a security system in my apartment. I went to the police and filed a report, but they said there wasn't much they could do without concrete evidence of harassment. They advised me to get a restraining order, which I did. I never saw Alex again, but the fear lingered, a constant reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly normal people. I still use dating apps, but I'm much more cautious now. I pay attention to the red flags, trust my gut, and never ignore the whispers of doubt in the back of my mind. Because sometimes, those whispers are screaming for a reason. I wish someone had warned me about the algorithm. Not the dating app algorithm specifically, though that's a monster in its own right. I mean the personal algorithm we all develop, the one that subtly dictates who we're attracted to, who we pursue, and ultimately, who we end up with. It's a silent, insidious force, and it almost ruined my life. Let me backtrack. I was always a late bloomer when it came to dating. High school was a blur of textbooks and awkwardness. College was a bit better, but I still prioritized academics over romance. I was the smart friend, the reliable friend, never really the girlfriend type. I had a couple of flings, nothing serious, and honestly, I was okay with it. I genuinely enjoyed my own company, my studies, and my friendships. But then I hit my late 20s, and suddenly everyone around me was getting married, buying houses, and posting baby pictures. The pressure, both internal and external, became unbearable. I started feeling like I was falling behind, missing out on some fundamental aspect of the human experience. So, I dove headfirst into the world of online dating. I started with the usual suspects: Tinder, Bumble, Hinge. I meticulously crafted my profile, choosing flattering photos, writing witty bios, and trying to project an image of someone who was both interesting and approachable. It was exhausting, like applying for a job I didn't even want. The initial results were underwhelming. A few matches, some polite conversations that fizzled out, and a handful of truly awful dates. There was the guy who talked incessantly about his crypto investments, the one who mansplained feminism to me, and the one who spent the entire date staring at his phone. It was discouraging, to say the least. But then I started noticing a pattern. The guys I was initially drawn to were always the same type: tall, brooding, artistic, with a penchant for obscure music and philosophical debates. They were the tortured souls, the misunderstood geniuses, the guys who seemed to radiate a certain kind of mysterious intensity. And every single time, it ended in disaster. There was Mark, the struggling musician, who claimed to be too sensitive for a real job. He was charismatic and charming at first, showering me with compliments and writing me love songs. But it quickly became clear that he was emotionally unavailable, perpetually broke, and constantly seeking validation. He ghosted me after a month, leaving me feeling used and confused. Then there was David, the aspiring filmmaker who saw the world through a lens of cynicism and despair. He was incredibly intelligent and articulate, but also deeply pessimistic and prone to fits of rage. He constantly criticized my choices, belittled my interests, and made me feel like I was never good enough. I stayed with him for 6 miserable months, convinced that I could somehow fix him. And there were others, each one slightly different but ultimately fitting the same mold. The brooding writer, the struggling painter, the aloof photographer. They were all incredibly attractive, undeniably interesting, and utterly incapable of forming healthy, stable relationships. Looking back, I realized that I was actively seeking out these types of guys. It wasn't just random chance. There was something in my own psyche that was drawn to their darkness, their complexity, their perceived depth. I thought that by dating them, I was somehow proving my own intelligence, my own sophistication, my own ability to handle complex emotions. I was trying to be the cool girl who could understand the tortured soul. But all I was doing was perpetuating a cycle of disappointment and heartbreak. I was ignoring red flags, dismissing toxic behavior, and settling for less than I deserved. I was so focused on trying to impress these guys that I completely lost sight of my own needs and values. The turning point came after my disastrous relationship with Alex, the performance artist. He was the epitome of the tortured soul archetype: brilliant, erratic, and completely self-absorbed. He treated me like an accessory, amused to be used and discarded at his whim. One night, after a particularly humiliating incident at one of his art shows, I finally snapped. I realized that I couldn't keep doing this to myself. I was tired of being the supportive girlfriend, the understanding confidant, the shoulder to cry on. I wanted someone who would support me, understand me, and be there for me in return. I broke up with Alex, deleted my dating apps, and decided to take a break from dating altogether. I needed to figure out why I kept attracting, and being attracted to, these kinds of guys. I needed to reprogram my algorithm. I started by going to therapy. It was a painful process, but it was also incredibly liberating. I learned that my attraction to tortured souls stemmed from a deep-seated need to be needed, to be validated, to prove my own worth. I had internalized the message that I wasn't good enough on my own, that I needed to fix someone else to feel complete. I also realized that I was conflating intensity with depth. I thought that because these guys were dramatic and emotionally volatile, they were somehow more authentic, more real. But in reality, their behavior was often a sign of immaturity, insecurity, and a lack of emotional regulation. Over time, I started to challenge my own assumptions and beliefs about relationships. I realized that healthy relationships weren't about fixing someone else or being their savior. They were about mutual respect, communication, and support. They were about finding someone who loved you for who you were, not for who you could be. I started focusing on my own needs and interests, pursuing my passions, and building a strong support system of friends and family. I learned to be happy on my own, to appreciate my own company, and to value my own worth. It took a long time, but eventually, I started to see things differently. I started to notice qualities in people that I had previously overlooked: kindness, empathy, stability, and a genuine interest in my well-being. I realized that these were the qualities that truly mattered, the qualities that would lead to a lasting and fulfilling relationship. When I finally felt ready to date again, I approached it with a completely different mindset. I was no longer looking for someone to complete me, to validate me, or to save me. I was looking for someone who was already whole, someone who was happy with themselves, and someone who wanted to share their life with me. That's when I met Ben. He wasn't tall, brooding, or artistic. He was a software engineer, kind, intelligent, and incredibly down-to-earth. He didn't write me love songs or engage in philosophical debates. He listened to me, supported me, and made me laugh. At first, I was hesitant. He didn't fit my type. He wasn't the kind of guy I usually went for. But the more time I spent with him, the more I realized that he was exactly what I needed. He was stable, reliable, and genuinely cared about me. He made me feel safe, loved, and appreciated. We've been together for 5 years now, and we're getting married next spring. It's not a perfect relationship, of course. We have our disagreements, our challenges, our moments of doubt, but we communicate, we compromise, and we always put each other first. It's the kind of relationship I never thought I was capable of having. So, if I could go back and warn my younger self about something, it wouldn't be about the dating apps or the bad dates. It would be about the algorithm. I would tell myself to be aware of the patterns, to challenge my own assumptions, and to be open to different possibilities. I would tell myself that true love isn't about finding someone who fits a certain mold, but about finding someone who loves you for who you truly are. Most importantly, I would warn myself to not scratch the surface. What might seem ideal in your mind will be nothing but a reflection of your desires until those desires are put into actions. And if those actions are not what your mind had thought would be ideal, don't fall victim to forcing that image. Instead, learn that you were wrong and adapt your desires to align with the true ideal, even if it wasn't your plan from the beginning. I never imagined I'd be telling this story, not because it's too outlandish or unbelievable, but because it's just embarrassing. Humiliating, really. I've always considered myself a fairly savvy person, not easily fooled. I prided myself on my intuition, my ability to read people. Apparently, I was dead wrong. It all started with a dating app, not Tinder, something a little more niche, catering to people who supposedly wanted meaningful connections. Yeah, right. I was freshly divorced in my late 30s, and just dipping my toes back into the dating pool. My friends kept telling me to get out there, meet new people. This app seemed like a low-pressure way to do just that. His profile stood out. Liam. Tall, dark, handsome, and a writer. He listed some of my favorite authors, quoted poetry I actually recognized, and claimed to enjoy long walks on the beach. I know. But the rest of his profile was so on point. We matched almost instantly, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He wasn't pushy or overly complimentary, just genuinely interested. He asked about my work, my hobbies, my favorite movies. We debated the merits of different coffee shops, shared embarrassing childhood stories, and even delved into deeper topics like our hopes and fears for the future. It felt easy. Too easy, maybe. After a week of constant messaging, he suggested we meet for coffee. I hesitated. I was still nervous about the whole dating thing, the fear of awkward silences and forced conversation. But Liam seemed different. He seemed real. So I agreed. The coffee date went even better than I expected. He was even more attractive in person, with a disarming smile and eyes that seemed to genuinely see me. We talked for hours, completely losing track of time. We discovered a shared love for vintage bookstores and obscure documentaries. He made me laugh. He made me think. And he made me feel seen. We went on several more dates over the next few weeks. Each one felt like a natural progression, a deeper connection forming. We explored local art galleries, tried new restaurants, and even went for a hike in the nearby mountains. He was attentive, thoughtful, and always made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. It was during one of those hikes that he started opening up about his past. He told me about his troubled childhood, his struggles with depression, and a past relationship that had ended badly. He painted a picture of himself as a sensitive, wounded soul, searching for someone to truly understand him. I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. My nurturing instincts kicked in, and I wanted to be that person for him, the one who could heal his wounds and show him what true love was. I ignored the small voice in the back of my head that whispered warnings, the nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. Things started moving quickly. Within a month, we were spending almost every night together. He practically moved into my apartment, filling my space with his books, his clothes, his presence. I was head over heels, convinced that I had finally found the one. Then came the requests. Small at first, almost insignificant. He needed help with rent. His writing wasn't really taking off. He was waiting on a check. Could I spot him a few $100s? Of course I could. I was in love, and what's a few dollars when you're helping someone you care about? Then it became more. His car needed repairs. His phone bill was overdue. He needed to buy new software for his writing. Each time, he promised to pay me back, swore it was just a temporary setback. Each time, I handed over the money, my doubts growing with each transaction. My friends started raising concerns. They pointed out how quickly things had progressed, how much money I was lending him, how little I actually knew about his life before me. I brushed them off, accusing them of being jealous or just not understanding our connection. The first big red flag came during a casual conversation about family. I asked about his parents, and he became evasive, changing the subject quickly. When I pressed him, he claimed they were estranged, living overseas, and he hadn't spoken to them in years. It seemed odd, but I chalked it up to his troubled past. Then one night, I decided to do some digging. I know, it sounds terrible, but my intuition was screaming at me, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. I started with a simple Google search of his name, and that's when the cracks began to appear. His social media presence was minimal, a few dormant accounts with very little information. There were no pictures of him with family or friends, no mentions of his writing career. It was like he had deliberately erased his past. I dug deeper, searching for any mention of his name in literary publications or online writing communities. Nothing. He claimed to have published several short stories and articles, but I couldn't find any evidence to support his claims. Then I found it, a small forum dedicated to exposing online dating scams. There, buried in the depths of the thread, was a post about a man using the name Liam, preying on vulnerable women and draining their bank accounts. The description matched him perfectly. My blood ran cold. I scrolled through the thread, reading the horror stories of other women who had fallen for his charm, his lies, his carefully constructed persona. They described the same pattern of rapid escalation, emotional manipulation, and financial exploitation. I felt sick to my stomach, a wave of nausea washing over me. I had been so blind, so naive. How could I have been so easily fooled? I had prided myself on my intelligence, my intuition, but I had completely missed the warning signs. I confronted him that night. I showed him the forum post, the Google searches, the lack of evidence to support his claims. He denied everything at first, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, a case of mistaken identity. But as I laid out the evidence, his facade began to crumble. He finally confessed, tears streaming down his face, begging for forgiveness. He admitted that his name wasn't Liam, that he wasn't a writer, that his entire life was a lie. He claimed he had fallen in love with me, that he never meant to hurt me, that he just needed the money to escape his troubled past. I didn't believe a word of it. I kicked him out that night, changed the locks, and blocked him on every platform imaginable. I felt like an idiot, a fool who had been played for a sucker. The aftermath was brutal. The emotional toll was immense. The feelings of betrayal, anger, and shame were overwhelming. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't shake the feeling that I had been violated in some way. Then there was the financial damage. I had lent him thousands of dollars, Money I couldn't afford to lose. He was long gone, vanished without a trace, leaving me with nothing but debt and a broken heart. I reported him to the police, but they said there was little they could do. He was a professional, they said, skilled at covering his tracks and evading detection. They advised me to cut my losses and move on. It took me a long time to recover from the experience. I went to therapy, leaned on my friends and family, and slowly began to rebuild my life. I learned to trust my instincts, to set boundaries, and to be more cautious about who I let into my life. I still use dating apps, but I approach them with a healthy dose of skepticism. I'm more aware of the red flags, more willing to walk away from situations that feel off. The experience taught me a valuable lesson, that even the most intelligent, discerning people can be vulnerable to manipulation and deception. It's a reminder to trust your gut, to be wary of people who seem too good to be true, and to protect yourself from those who would exploit your vulnerabilities. And also a reminder that some people truly have terrible intentions. I never imagined I'd be telling this story, but I hope that by sharing my experience, I can help prevent others from falling victim to the same kind of scam. It's a reminder that love can blind you, and that sometimes the most charming people are the ones you should be most wary of. The wounds will eventually heal. Okay, so I'm not usually one to share stuff like this. I generally keep my personal life pretty private, but honestly, this is something that's been eating at me for years, and I think maybe writing it all out will help. It's about a guy I met online, a dating app specifically, and it's the kind of story that makes you question everything you thought you knew about people. This actually happened, and that's the part that still creeps me out. It was probably around 2015 or 2016. I was in my mid-20s, living in a decent-sized city, working a boring office job, and feeling that familiar pressure to find the one. All my friends were getting married, having babies, and I was swiping through profiles on dating apps. I know, real original. Anyway, I matched with this guy named Alex. His profile was pretty standard, a few smiling pictures, a short bio about liking hiking and craft beer. He seemed normal, maybe even a little bland, which, at the time, was kind of what I was looking for. I was tired of the dramatic, artsy types, and just wanted someone stable. We started chatting, and he seemed nice enough. He asked about my job, my hobbies, my family. Nothing too intense, just normal getting to know you stuff. After a few days, he asked if I wanted to meet up for coffee. I hesitated for a second, but then figured why not? He seemed harmless, and I was bored. We met at a coffee shop near my office. He was taller than I expected, maybe around 6 feet, with short brown hair and kind of average features. He was wearing a plain t-shirt and jeans, nothing flashy. We talked for about an hour, and the conversation was fine. He was a good listener, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. There weren't any sparks flying, but there weren't any red flags either. We went on a few more dates after that. A movie, dinner, a walk in the park. Each time, he was perfectly polite, perfectly attentive. He always paid, always walked me to my door, always texted me the next day to say he had a good time. It was all very textbook, but there was something about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Something off. He was almost too perfect, too eager to please. It felt like he was trying too hard to be the ideal boyfriend, like he was playing a role rather than being himself. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe I was used to dating jerks and couldn't recognize a genuinely nice guy when I saw one. But the feeling persisted. One night, after we had been dating for about a month, he invited me back to his place. I had been putting it off, partly because of that nagging feeling I had, and partly because I just wasn't that into him. But he was so persistent, so insistent that he just wanted to show me his record collection, that I finally caved. His apartment was small and sparsely furnished. It was clean, but sterile, like no one actually lived there. There were no personal touches, no pictures on the walls, no books on the shelves, just the bare essentials. The record collection was impressive, though, mostly classic rock and blues. We listened to music for a while, and he made me a drink. We were sitting on his couch, and he put his arm around me. I tensed up a little, but tried to relax. He leaned in to kiss me, and I let him. The kiss was weird. It was too intense, too urgent. His grip tightened on my arm, and I felt a sudden surge of panic. I pulled away. I should probably go, I said, standing up. He looked surprised, then a little hurt. But why? I thought we were having a good time. "I'm just tired," I said, trying to sound casual. "It's been a long day." He didn't say anything, just stared at me with those unnervingly intense eyes. I walked to the door, my hand shaking as I reached for the knob. "I'll walk you out," he said, following me. As we were walking down the hallway to the entrance of the building, he started talking about how he felt about me. He stated how it was love at first sight, and he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me. I awkwardly chuckled, and I told him I was still figuring things out. I was starting to become scared. The next day, I decided to end things with him. I couldn't shake that feeling that something was seriously wrong. I sent him a text, saying that I didn't think we were a good match, and that I wanted to see other people. He didn't respond. I figured that was that. I blocked his number and tried to forget about him. But he didn't forget about me. A few days later, I started getting strange emails. They were from an anonymous address, and they contained personal information about me. My home address, my phone number, my work schedule. Things that I had never told him directly. The emails weren't threatening, exactly. They were more like warnings. They said things like, "I know where you are, and I'm always watching." I was terrified. I changed my email address, but the emails kept coming. I went to the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do without a direct threat. They suggested I get a restraining order, but I didn't even know where to find him. Then, things started happening in real life. I would come home from work and find things moved around in my apartment. A book on the floor, a picture turned upside down. Nothing major, but enough to make me feel like I was being watched. One night, I was walking home from a friend's house when I saw him. He was standing across the street, in the shadows, just watching me. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. He didn't say anything, didn't move. He just stood there, staring. I ran. I ran all the way home, locked the door, and didn't come out for days. I was living in a state of constant fear. I was afraid to go to work, afraid to go out, afraid to even be in my own apartment. I felt like I was being stalked, hunted. Finally, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I quit my job, broke my lease, and moved back in with my parents in another state. I changed my name, got a new phone number, and tried to start over. For a while it worked. I felt safe again, like I had finally escaped him. But then, a few months later, I got another email. It was just one sentence. "You can't hide from me." That was it. I completely broke down. I went to the police again, and this time they took me seriously. They launched a full investigation, but they couldn't find him. It was like he had vanished into thin air. I lived in fear for years. I never dated again, never went out alone, never felt safe. I was a prisoner in my own life. Then, a few years ago, I saw something on the news that made my blood run cold. There was a story about a serial killer who had been arrested in another state. He had been preying on women he met online, stalking them, and then killing them. They showed a picture of him on TV, and I recognized him instantly. It was Alex. I don't know what to say. I'm still processing it. I'm grateful that I got away, but I'm also haunted by the thought of what could have happened. I was so close to becoming another victim. The scariest part is that I thought I could recognize a dangerous person. I thought I was smart enough to see through his facade, but I was wrong. And that's what keeps me up at night. I am still in therapy, and I have not been on a date since. I may never be able to trust someone on a dating website again. If you ever get the feeling that something is off, do not hesitate to listen to your gut. Dating websites can be dangerous. This can actually happen to someone, and it nearly happened to me. I met him on Bumble, which feels like strike one right off the bat. I'd been swiping half-heartedly for weeks, mostly out of boredom. My friends were all coupled up, or at least actively trying to be, and I felt this weird pressure to participate in the dating game, even though a part of me just wanted to stay home with my cat and binge-watch documentaries. His profile was intriguing, not the typical gym selfie, and looking for my partner in crime cliché. It was more artful, I guess. He had photos of him hiking in what looked like the Pacific Northwest, reading in a dimly lit coffee shop, and one blurry shot of him playing guitar on a stage somewhere. His bio was short and to the point. Writer, explorer, seeker. It screamed pretentious hipster, but something about it also made me curious. I swiped right. We matched almost immediately, and he messaged me a few minutes later. "Hey," he wrote, "what are you seeking?" It wasn't the most original opening line, but it was better than WYD. We chatted for a few days, and I actually found myself enjoying our conversations. He was intelligent, well-read, and had a dry sense of humor that matched mine. He asked thoughtful questions about my work, my interests, and my dreams. He didn't bombard me with compliments or try to rush things. It was refreshing. His name was Julian, and he claimed to be a novelist working on his second book. He said he lived in an old Victorian house on the outskirts of town, which, in retrospect, should have been a massive red flag. But I was caught up in the novelty of it all. I was tired of the same old boring dates, the same predictable conversations. Julian seemed different, mysterious, and maybe a little dangerous. After a week of chatting, he suggested we meet up. He proposed a picnic in a secluded park he knew, far from the crowds and noise of the city. Again, red flag city. But I ignored it. I told myself it was just a picnic, a harmless way to get to know each other better. I even told my best friend, Sarah, about it. She raised an eyebrow but ultimately said, "Just be careful, okay? Text me every hour, and if anything feels off, get out of there." The day of the picnic was beautiful, sunny, with a slight breeze. I packed a basket with sandwiches, fruit, and a bottle of wine, trying to ignore the nagging feeling of anxiety in the pit of my stomach. I drove to the park Julian had described, which turned out to be even more secluded than I had imagined. It was a sprawling expanse of green, surrounded by towering trees and winding trails. I parked my car and walked towards the designated meeting spot, a large oak tree overlooking a small pond. Julian was already there, sitting on a blanket with a picnic basket of his own. He stood up when he saw me, a warm smile on his face. He was taller than I expected, with piercing blue eyes and dark, tousled hair. He was wearing a worn leather jacket and a pair of faded jeans. He looked like he'd stepped straight out of a romance novel. "Hey," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "I'm glad you made it." "Me too," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We spent the next few hours talking, laughing, and sharing stories. Julian was even more charming in person than he was online. He told me about his writing, his travels, and his unconventional approach to life. He seemed genuinely interested in me, asking about my fears, my regrets, and my hidden desires. He had a way of making me feel seen, understood, and vulnerable. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, Julian pulled out a bottle of wine. We drank slowly, savoring the moment, the silence between us punctuated by the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves. The wine loosened my inhibitions, and I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't anticipated. I told him about my past relationships, my insecurities, and my deep-seated fear of being alone. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, he reached out and took my hand, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through my body. "You're not alone," he said softly. "I see you and I understand you." It was in that moment, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the warmth of his gaze, that I made a terrible mistake. I let my guard down. I allowed myself to believe that Julian was someone I could trust, someone who genuinely cared about me. "I want to show you something," he said, his voice low and hypnotic. "There's a hidden trail that leads to a secluded spot. It's the most beautiful place in the park, especially at night." I hesitated for a moment, the warning bells in my head finally starting to ring. But I ignored them. I told myself it was just a trail, a harmless adventure. I wanted to impress him, to show him that I wasn't afraid to take risks. "Okay," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Let's go." We packed up the picnic basket and started walking along the trail, which quickly became narrower and more overgrown. The trees closed in around us, blocking out the last rays of sunlight. It was getting dark, and the only light came from the moon filtering through the leaves. As we walked deeper into the woods, I started to feel uneasy. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. The sounds of the forest seemed amplified, every rustle and snap sending shivers down my spine. I could feel Julian's hand tightening around mine, his touch no longer comforting but possessive. "How much further?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Almost there," he replied, his voice strangely distant. "Just a little bit more." We continued walking for what felt like an eternity, until we reached a small clearing. In the center of the clearing was a dilapidated stone structure, overgrown with vines and moss. It looked like an old mausoleum or a forgotten shrine. "What is this place?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. "This is my sanctuary," Julian said, his eyes gleaming in the moonlight. A place where I come to be alone with my thoughts. He led me inside the structure, which was even more unsettling than it looked from the outside. The air was cold and damp, and the walls were covered in strange symbols and carvings. In the center of the room was a stone altar, stained with what looked like dried blood. I wanted to leave, to run as fast as I could back to my car, but I was frozen in place, paralyzed by fear. I knew, deep down, that I had made a terrible mistake. I had trusted the wrong person, and now I was trapped in a nightmare. "I have something to show you," Julian said, his voice now devoid of any warmth or emotion. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver knife. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer. He simply smiled, a cold, cruel smile that sent a wave of terror washing over me. He stepped closer, the knife glinting in the moonlight. "Tonight," he said, his voice low and menacing, "you will become part of my story." I screamed, but it was no use. There was no one to hear me, no one to save me. I was alone with a madman in the middle of the woods, and my life was about to end. I don't want to go into the details of what happened next. It's too painful, too traumatic. Suffice it to say that I managed to escape. Barely. I fought back, scratched, kicked, and screamed until I finally managed to break free from his grasp and run into the woods. I ran blindly, stumbling through the darkness, until I finally reached the park entrance. I flagged down a passing car and begged the driver to take me to the nearest police station. The police launched a full-scale investigation, but they never found Julian. He had vanished without a trace, leaving no evidence behind. They searched his house, but it was empty, abandoned. It was as if he had never existed. I spent weeks recovering in the hospital, both physically and emotionally. I had nightmares every night, reliving the terror of that night in the woods. I was diagnosed with PTSD and started seeing a therapist. It's been years since that night, but the memories still haunt me. I'm still afraid to go out alone, especially at night. I'm still terrified of meeting new people, of trusting anyone. I'll never understand why Julian chose me, why he wanted to hurt me. I'll never know if he's out there, still preying on innocent women. All I know is that the events of that night will stay with me forever. I learned a valuable lesson that night, a lesson about trust, about danger, and about the importance of listening to your instincts. And I'll never make the same mistake again. I am constantly reminding my close friends and family to be safe and to listen to their gut. I never imagined I'd be telling this story, not in a million years. I always considered myself a pretty good judge of character, maybe a little naive, but generally grounded. I thought I could spot a weirdo from a mile away, that I had some kind of internal radar for the off-kilter. Turns out, my radar was broken, or maybe just needed new batteries. This all started with an app called Serendipity. It was supposed to be different from the usual swipe-and-forget dating apps. Serendipity focused on shared experiences, suggesting matches based on places you both frequented, coffee shops, museums, parks, even grocery stores. The idea was that you already had something in common, a shared space, a potential icebreaker. It seemed harmless enough, maybe even a little charming. I'd been single for a while, not actively looking, but open to the possibility of something real. A friend suggested Serendipity, saying it might lead to more meaningful connections than the usual suspects. So, I downloaded it, created a profile, and started browsing. That's when I saw him. His name was Julian. His profile picture was a little blurry, taken from a distance, but he had this intense, captivating gaze. His bio was short and cryptic, looking for someone to explore the hidden corners of the city with. He frequented a lot of the same places I did. A quirky bookstore downtown, a vintage record shop, a hidden speakeasy I loved. It felt like we were meant to cross paths, like the app was working its magic. I swiped right, and within minutes, we matched. We started chatting, and it was surprisingly easy. He was intelligent, witty, and had a way of making me feel like I was the only person in the world. He asked thoughtful questions, listened intently to my answers, and shared his own stories with a disarming honesty. He was a writer, he said, working on a novel about the city's forgotten history. He talked about hidden tunnels, secret societies, and urban legends. It was all a little fantastical, but I was intrigued. After a week of constant messaging, we decided to meet in person. He suggested the speakeasy, the one we both frequented, the one that had shown up on our shared locations. It felt fitting, like the app was orchestrating our meeting. The speakeasy was tucked away in a back alley, hidden behind an unmarked door. Inside, it was dimly lit, with plush velvet seating and a jazz band playing softly in the corner. It was my favorite place to unwind, a little escape from the everyday. Julian was already there when I arrived. He was even more captivating in person, with piercing blue eyes and a charming smile. He was dressed impeccably, in a tailored suit that seemed a little out of place for the casual atmosphere, but it suited him. We talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing. He told me more about his novel, his passion for history, his love for the city. I shared my own dreams and fears, my hopes for the future. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and I felt a connection I hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. As the night drew to a close, he walked me home. At my doorstep, he hesitated, then leaned in and kissed me. It was a gentle, lingering kiss that left me breathless. He promised to call me, and I floated into my apartment, feeling like I was walking on air. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Julian and I went on dates almost every night. We explored hidden corners of the city, just like he'd promised. We visited abandoned buildings, walked through forgotten cemeteries, and discovered secret gardens tucked away in unexpected places. He showed me a side of the city I never knew existed, a world of mystery and intrigue. He was charming, adventurous, and intensely passionate. I fell hard and I fell fast. But there were also things that didn't quite add up. He was secretive about his personal life, never talking about his family or friends. He avoided taking pictures, always deflecting with a joke or a change of subject. He also had a strange obsession with the past, often getting lost in elaborate stories about historical figures and forgotten events. At first, I brushed it off as quirky, a part of his artistic personality. But as time went on, it started to feel unsettling. One night, we were at the bookstore, browsing the shelves. Julian picked up an old, leather-bound book and started reading aloud, his voice low and hypnotic. It was a passage about a secret society that supposedly controlled the city's fate, pulling strings from the shadows. He spoke with such conviction, such intensity, that it felt like he believed every word. I laughed it off, telling him it was just a story, but he looked at me with a strange, knowing smile. "Everything is connected," he whispered. "You just have to know where to look." That night, I had a nightmare. I dreamt I was lost in a maze of dark tunnels, chased by shadowy figures. Julian was there, too, but he wasn't helping me. He was leading me deeper into the darkness, whispering secrets I didn't understand. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding. I tried to dismiss it as just a bad dream, but the feeling of unease lingered throughout the day. I decided to do some research on Julian. I searched his name online, but found nothing. No social media profiles, no articles, no mention of his novel. It was like he didn't exist. It was strange, but I figured he was just private, maybe old-fashioned. But then I started digging deeper. I remembered him mentioning a specific historical event, a fire that had destroyed a large part of the city in the early 1900s. I looked it up and found an old newspaper article about it. In the article, there was a photograph of a group of people standing in front of the burning buildings. And in the back, partially obscured by smoke, I saw a face that looked exactly like Julian's. I dismissed it at first, thinking it was just a coincidence, a trick of the light. But then I found another photograph, this time from a different historical event, a political rally in the 1920s. And again, in the background, I saw Julian's face. I was starting to freak out. I showed the pictures to my friend, the one who had recommended Serendipity. She was just as freaked out as I was. "This is insane," she said. "It's like he's been alive for 100 years." We decided to do some more digging. We focused on the secret society he had mentioned, the one from the book. We found some obscure references to it online, in old historical documents and conspiracy theory websites. The society was supposedly made up of wealthy and influential families who had controlled the city's fate for generations. They were rumored to possess ancient knowledge and mystical powers. The more we researched, the more terrified I became. It felt like I had stumbled into some kind of bizarre conspiracy, like I was being drawn into a world I didn't understand. I knew I had to confront Julian, but I was afraid. I didn't know what he was capable of. I decided to meet him at the speakeasy, the place where we had first met. I figured it was a neutral location, a place where I felt safe. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in our usual booth, nursing a drink. He smiled when he saw me, but his eyes seemed colder than usual. "You look troubled," he said, his voice low and smooth. "Is something wrong?" I took a deep breath and pulled out the photographs. I showed them to him, one by one, watching his face carefully. He didn't say anything, didn't react at all. He just stared at the pictures, his eyes unreadable. When I was finished, he finally spoke. "I see you've been doing some research," he said, his voice calm and measured. "You know too much." He stood up, and suddenly, the atmosphere in the speakeasy changed. The music seemed to fade away, the lights dimmed, and the other patrons seemed to disappear. It was like we were the only two people in the world. "I was hoping it wouldn't come to this," he said, "but you leave me no choice." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, ornate dagger. It was made of silver, with strange symbols etched into the blade. I gasped and stumbled back, knocking over a table. I tried to run, but he was too fast. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't fight it," he whispered, his voice hypnotic. "This is your destiny." I struggled against him, screaming for help, but no one seemed to hear me. He raised the dagger, and I closed my eyes, bracing for the end. But then, something unexpected happened. The door to the speakeasy burst open, and my friend rushed in, followed by 2 police officers. They had been waiting outside, ready to intervene if things went south. Julian froze, his eyes wide with shock. He dropped the dagger and tried to run, but the officers tackled him to the ground. They arrested him and took him away. I was safe, but I was shaken to the core. The police investigated Julian, and they uncovered a disturbing history. He was a known con artist who had been preying on women for years, using different identities and elaborate schemes. He had a fascination with the occult and was obsessed with the secret society I had researched. He had even been linked to several unsolved disappearances. Serendipity was shut down after this, and I hope it stays down. I never went back to the speakeasy. I moved to a different city, changed my name, and tried to start over. But I'll never forget Julian, or the nightmare I almost became a part of. I never imagined I'd be telling this story, but I feel like it's important to share it, to warn others about the dangers of online dating and the importance of trusting your instincts. Sometimes, the most charming people are the most dangerous, and sometimes, the most serendipitous encounters are the ones you should avoid. I try to live life now, but I always know, never trust dating apps. It's been almost a decade, and I still catch myself replaying the events in my head, trying to pinpoint the exact moment when my perfectly ordinary dating life veered off into something else, something I still can't fully explain. I was in my early 20s, living in a small college town, and like most of my friends, I was navigating the world of online dating. Tinder, Bumble, OkCupid, I dabbled in them all, mostly looking for casual fun and maybe, just maybe, something more meaningful. I matched with Liam on OkCupid. His profile was surprisingly thoughtful, filled with references to obscure indie films and philosophical quotes. He described himself as an introspective wanderer with a passion for art and long conversations. He was attractive in a brooding, intellectual way, dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and a perpetually serious expression. He wasn't the typical frat boy I usually went for, but something about him intrigued me. Our initial messages were engaging. We talked about our favorite books, debated the merits of different directors, and even delved into our personal philosophies. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me beyond surface-level attraction. After a week of messaging, we decided to meet for coffee. The coffee date went surprisingly well. Liam was even more captivating in person. He had a quiet intensity that drew me in, and he listened intently to everything I said, as if I were revealing profound secrets. We talked for hours, easily losing track of time. By the end of the date, I was completely smitten. We started seeing each other regularly. We went to art galleries, watched independent films at the local cinema, and spent hours talking in dimly lit coffee shops. Liam was unlike anyone I had ever dated. He was deep, complex, and utterly fascinating. He seemed to see the world in a different way, and he opened my eyes to new perspectives and ideas. But as I got closer to Liam, I started noticing some oddities. He was intensely private about his personal life. He never talked about his family, his past, or his friends. When I asked him about his job, he was vague, saying he worked on projects from home. He never invited me to his apartment, always insisting on meeting at public places. He also had a strange fascination with death and the occult. He collected antique books on spiritualism, attended seances, and often spoke about the afterlife with an unsettling curiosity. He wasn't overtly morbid, but there was a persistent undercurrent of darkness in his personality that made me uneasy. I tried to brush off my concerns, telling myself that he was just eccentric and that I was being judgmental. But the oddities kept piling up. One night, we were walking through a park when he suddenly stopped and stared intently at a seemingly empty patch of grass. When I asked him what he was looking at, he said he saw spirits and that they were trying to communicate with him. Another time, he gave me a necklace with a strange symbol on it, claiming it was an ancient amulet that would protect me from negative energy. The symbol looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. I later discovered it was a variation of a symbol associated with the controversial occult group, known for their extreme rituals and beliefs. Despite my growing unease, I found myself increasingly drawn to Liam. He had a magnetic quality that was hard to resist. I was infatuated with his intelligence, his passion, and his unique perspective on the world. I wanted to believe that he was just a misunderstood artist with a penchant for the unconventional. Then, things took a turn for the truly disturbing. One evening, Liam invited me to a special event at a secluded location outside of town. He was secretive about the details, only saying that it was a gathering of like-minded individuals who shared his interest in spirituality and the occult. Despite my reservations, I agreed to go. The location turned out to be an old, abandoned farmhouse nestled deep in the woods. The house was dilapidated and overgrown with vines, giving it a sinister and foreboding appearance. As we approached the entrance, I could hear chanting and the faint sound of drums coming from inside. When we entered the house, I was immediately struck by the scene before me. A group of people dressed in dark robes were gathered in a circle in the center of the living room. Candles flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air was thick with incense and a strange, musty odor. Liam led me to a spot on the edge of the circle and whispered that I should just observe and not participate. I nervously nodded, feeling increasingly out of place and uncomfortable. The chanting intensified, and the group began to sway and move in a rhythmic fashion. Then, the leader of the group, a gaunt man with piercing eyes, stepped forward and began to speak in a language I didn't understand. His voice was deep and resonant, and his words seemed to vibrate through the air. The chanting grew louder, and the atmosphere in the room became increasingly charged. Suddenly, the leader raised his hands and shouted something in the unknown language. At that moment, several members of the group grabbed a young woman who was standing nearby and dragged her into the center of the circle. The woman screamed and struggled, but her cries were quickly drowned out by the chanting. I watched in horror as the group began to perform some sort of ritual on the woman. They chanted, danced, and made strange gestures over her body. I couldn't understand what they were doing, but it was clear that it was something deeply disturbing and potentially dangerous. I turned to Liam, my eyes wide with terror, and asked him what was happening. He simply smiled and said that it was a cleansing ceremony, and that the woman was willingly participating. I didn't believe him. I knew that something terrible was about to happen. I tried to leave, but Liam grabbed my arm and held me back. He insisted that I stay and witness the power of the ritual. I struggled against his grip, but he was stronger than I expected. I felt trapped and helpless. As the ritual progressed, the chanting reached a fever pitch, and the atmosphere in the room became almost unbearable. The woman in the center of the circle was now completely still, her eyes closed and her body limp. The leader of the group raised a dagger and prepared to strike. At that moment, something inside me snapped. I screamed, pushed Liam away, and ran towards the woman. I grabbed her hand and pulled her to her feet. Together, we fled the farmhouse, running as fast as we could into the darkness of the woods. We didn't stop running until we reached a main road. We flagged down a passing car and asked the driver to take us to the nearest police station. When we arrived, we told the police everything that had happened. The police raided the farmhouse, but the group had already dispersed. They found evidence of ritualistic activity, but no bodies and no definitive proof of any crimes. Liam was never apprehended, and the woman I rescued disappeared shortly after the incident. I was left traumatized and haunted by what I had witnessed. I dropped out of college, moved back home, and spent months in therapy trying to process what had happened. I never dated again for years, and I still struggle to trust people. To this day, I don't know what exactly Liam was involved in or what the group was planning to do with the woman, but I know that I narrowly escaped something truly evil. The memory of that night, the chanting, the shadows, the fear in the woman's eyes, it's all etched into my mind forever. It's a reminder that sometimes the most charming and intelligent people can be hiding the darkest secrets, and that sometimes the most ordinary dates can lead to the most extraordinary horrors. I don't use dating apps anymore. I see people who resemble Liam sometimes. I avoid crowds. I still dream of the farmhouse. I hate that saying. Hindsight is 20/20ths. It's such a cliche, but man, is it true. Especially when I think about Mark. Mark, where do I even begin? Maybe with the fact that I met him at a taxidermy convention. Yeah, you read that right. A taxidermy convention. I was there for a story. I'm a freelance journalist, always looking for the quirky and unusual. He was there, well, because he's really into stuffing dead animals. Looking back, that should have been my first clue. Not that taxidermy is inherently bad or anything, but the level of enthusiasm he had for it was intense. He had this gleam in his eye when he talked about it, like he was discussing some profound philosophical concept. It was a little unnerving. I was immediately drawn to his awkward charm. He was tall and lanky, with this mop of unruly brown hair that he constantly pushed out of his eyes. He wore thick-rimmed glasses that were perpetually sliding down his nose. He was the kind of guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, but then he'd say something surprisingly insightful, and you'd be hooked. We started talking about the ethics of taxidermy, me playing devil's advocate, him passionately defending the practice as a way to preserve and honor nature. He was eloquent, well-read, and surprisingly funny. I was intrigued. We exchanged numbers, and he texted me that night, complimenting my unique perspective and asking if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. I said yes, thinking, what the hell? It'll be a good story, at the very least. The coffee date went well. He was even more charming in a one-on-one setting. He talked about his work. He was a librarian, which I found oddly fitting, and his passion for obscure historical facts. He had this encyclopedic knowledge of everything, from ancient Roman plumbing systems to the history of ketchup. It was fascinating, if a little overwhelming. Red flag number 2. The man couldn't stop talking about himself. I chalked it up to nerves, though. We started seeing each other regularly. He took me to museums, art galleries, and obscure film screenings. He introduced me to his friends, who were all as quirky and eccentric as he was. I felt like I was being welcomed into the secret society of weirdos, and I loved it. I was bored with the typical dating scene, the endless rounds of drinks and meaningless small talk. Mark was different. He challenged me, made me think, and kept me on my toes. But then the little quirks started to add up. He was incredibly controlling about our schedule. He insisted on planning every date, down to the minute. He'd get visibly agitated if I suggested doing something different, or if I was even 5 minutes late. Red flag number 3, control freak alert. I told myself he was just organized, that he liked having a plan, but it felt more like he needed to be in charge, to dictate every aspect of our relationship. He was also incredibly jealous, not in a dramatic, accusatory way, but in a subtle, passive-aggressive manner. If I mentioned a male colleague or friend, he'd grill me about them, asking probing questions about their personality and our relationship. He'd make little digs, implying that they were trying to hit on me. Red flag number 4, insecurity central. I tried to reassure him that he had nothing to worry about, but it never seemed to be enough. The biggest red flag of all, though, was his obsession with the past. He was fixated on his ex-girlfriend, Sarah. He talked about her constantly, reminiscing about their dates, their inside jokes, their shared interests. He painted her as this perfect, idealized woman, the one who got away. I felt like I was constantly being compared to her, measured against this impossible standard. It was exhausting. One night, we were at his apartment, watching a movie. He excused himself to go to the bathroom, and I decided to snoop. I know it was wrong, but I couldn't help myself. I had this nagging feeling that something wasn't right, that he was hiding something from me. I started rummaging through his drawers, and that's when I found it. A box filled with photos of Sarah. There were hundreds of them, dating back to their first date. They were plastered all over his walls, too. But the pictures weren't normal snapshots. They were disturbing. In some of them, Sarah was sleeping, and Mark was standing over her, staring down with this intense, almost predatory look in his eyes. In others, she was crying, and he was smiling. There were even a few that looked like she was unconscious, and he was posing her like a taxidermied animal. It was horrifying. I felt sick to my stomach. I closed the box, put it back in the drawer, and ran out of the apartment. I didn't say anything to Mark. I just ghosted him. I changed my number, blocked him on social media, and never looked back. It was the most cowardly thing I've ever done, but I was terrified. I didn't know what he was capable of, and I didn't want to find out. It took me a long time to recover from that relationship. I felt stupid for ignoring all the red flags, for letting myself get so caught up in the novelty of it all. I spent months in therapy, trying to understand why I was drawn to someone so clearly unstable. My therapist told me that I had a pattern of seeking out damaged people, of trying to fix them. It was a revelation. I realized that I was attracted to the drama, to the challenge of trying to make someone whole. But it was a dangerous game, and I almost got burned. Now, I'm much more cautious about who I date. I pay attention to the red flags, no matter how small. I trust my instincts, even when they tell me something I don't want to hear. And I know that it's okay to walk away, even if it means hurting someone's feelings. My safety and well-being are more important than anything else. I still think about Mark sometimes, wondering what happened to him, if he ever found someone else to obsess over. I hope he got help, that he's not still out there, preying on vulnerable women. But I also know that I can't control his actions, only my own. All I can do is learn from my mistakes and try to make better choices in the future. And I know that hindsight is 20/20ths. Maybe now I know what to look for. The worst part, I still have a weird fascination with taxidermy. I'd never go back to that convention, though. I'm over it. The dating app pinged on my phone, another notification in a sea of digital connections. I usually ignored them, the endless parade of faces blurring together into a meaningless stream of potential somethings. But today was different. I was bored, restless, and nursing a particularly nasty breakup. My best friend Maya had practically forced me to re-download the app, promising it would be a distraction, a way to feel seen again. So, with a sigh, I opened the app and started swiping. His profile was simple, unassuming. A picture of him hiking, another of him laughing with friends around a bonfire. His bio was even less revealing, just a few lines about enjoying good coffee and even better conversation. Nothing flashy, nothing overtly trying to impress, just normal. And maybe that's what caught my attention. I was so tired of the carefully curated images, the boastful bios, the desperate attempts to project an ideal self. He seemed real. We matched, and I braced myself for the usual awkward opening line. Instead, he messaged me a quote from a book I'd mentioned on my profile, a book I hadn't thought anyone else even knew. It was a clever, thoughtful gesture, and I found myself smiling for the first time in days. His name was Alex, and we started talking. Not the casual, superficial chatter that usually filled these exchanges, but real, honest conversation. We talked about our dreams, our fears, our families, our pasts. We talked for hours, late into the night, until the lines between the digital world and reality began to blur. He was funny, intelligent, and surprisingly insightful. He listened, really listened, and he made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. After a week of constant texting, he asked me out. I hesitated. I'd been burned before, lured in by online personas that crumbled under the weight of real-life interaction. But there was something different about Alex, something that made me want to take a chance. We met at a small, cozy bookstore cafe in my neighborhood. He was even more attractive in person, with kind eyes and a disarming smile. The conversation flowed effortlessly, as if we'd known each other for years. We talked about everything and nothing, laughing and sharing stories like old friends. He was just as genuine and engaging in person as he had been online. By the end of the night, I was completely smitten. We started seeing each other regularly. We went to art museums, explored hidden coffee shops, and spent hours walking through the park, lost in conversation. He introduced me to his friends, who were equally warm and welcoming. He seemed to genuinely care about me, about my thoughts and feelings. He made me feel safe, valued, and loved. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could truly be myself, without fear of judgment or rejection. Things were moving fast, maybe too fast, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I was falling hard for Alex, and I couldn't imagine my life without him. He seemed to feel the same way. He told me he loved me after only a month, and I surprised myself by saying it back without hesitation. It was a whirlwind romance, a fairy tale come to life. I was convinced that I'd finally found my happily ever after. But fairy tales, as I was about to learn, are rarely what they seem. The first red flag was subtle, almost imperceptible. It started with small inconsistencies in his stories, details that didn't quite add up. He'd contradict himself, forget things he'd told me, or offer explanations that sounded rehearsed. I brushed it off as forgetfulness, a side effect of his busy schedule. Then there were the late-night phone calls, hushed conversations he'd have in another room, always claiming it was work-related. He became more secretive, more guarded. He started spending less time with me, citing work commitments or family obligations. I tried to talk to him about it, to express my concerns, but he'd always deflect, dismissing my fears as irrational or insecure. He'd reassure me that everything was fine, that he loved me, that I was imagining things, and I wanted to believe him, desperately. But the doubts kept creeping in, gnawing at my peace of mind. I started snooping, something I never thought I'd do. I checked his phone, his email, his social media accounts. I found nothing, absolutely nothing. He was meticulous, careful to cover his tracks. My anxiety grew with each passing day. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything but the growing suspicion that something was terribly wrong. I felt like I was losing my mind, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. Finally, I decided to confront him. I waited for him to come home from work, my heart pounding in my chest. When he walked through the door, I took a deep breath and told him I needed to talk. He seemed surprised, uneasy. He asked what was wrong, but I could see the guilt in his eyes. I told him about the inconsistencies, the secrets, the doubts that were consuming me. I asked him to be honest with me, to tell me the truth, no matter how painful it might be. He hesitated, then sighed, running a hand through his hair. He admitted that he hadn't been entirely honest with me, that there were things he'd been keeping from me. He claimed it was to protect me, to spare me the pain, but I knew that wasn't true. I demanded to know what he was hiding, and he finally broke down, confessing a truth so shocking, so bizarre, that it shattered my world. He wasn't who he said he was. His name wasn't Alex. His job wasn't what he described. His life wasn't the carefully constructed facade he'd presented to me. He was living a lie, a meticulously crafted deception designed to lure me in, to gain my trust, to use me. He was part of a group, a cult maybe. He didn't offer many details, and I didn't want to know them. They sought out vulnerable women, those who were lonely, heartbroken, or searching for something more. They preyed on their emotions, their vulnerabilities, their desires. They offered them a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, a sense of love. But it was all a lie, a carefully orchestrated manipulation designed to control them, to exploit them, to sacrifice them. He'd been assigned to me, tasked with winning my affection, gaining my trust, and ultimately delivering me to them. He claimed he'd fallen in love with me, that he couldn't go through with it, that he wanted to protect me. But I didn't know what to believe. I ordered him out of my apartment, screaming at him to leave and never come back. I called the police, but they dismissed my claims as the ramblings of a heartbroken woman. I had no proof, no evidence, just a story that sounded too outlandish to be true. I changed my locks, disconnected my phone, deleted my social media accounts, and went into hiding. I moved to a new city, started a new life, trying to forget the nightmare I'd narrowly escaped. But the fear never truly leaves you. The trust is broken, the innocence lost. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, suspicious of every stranger, haunted by the knowledge that someone I loved, someone I trusted, was willing to betray me in the most unimaginable way. The dating app remains uninstalled on my phone, a stark reminder of the dangers that lurk beneath the surface of our digital connections. I crave connection, I long for love, but I'm terrified of opening myself up again, of falling prey to another carefully crafted deception. What started as a normal day, a simple swipe on a dating app, turned into a chilling reminder that sometimes the monsters we fear aren't hiding in the shadows, but smiling at us across the table, whispering sweet nothings into our ears. And sometimes the greatest danger lies not in the darkness, but in the false light of a love that isn't real. The normal day ended in someone's truth and deception. I don't know what's worse, the deception or the truth. I met him on OkCupid. I know. Dating apps are a dime a dozen these days. But back then, OkCupid felt different. More thoughtful. Less swipe happy. I was 24, fresh out of a long-term relationship, and feeling cautiously optimistic about dipping my toes back into the dating pool. His profile stood out. He was a writer, loved old movies, and had this slightly brooding, intellectual vibe that I found strangely appealing. We messaged back and forth for a couple of weeks, and the conversations were genuinely engaging. He wasn't just trying to get into my pants. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. His name was Julian, and he was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Smart, funny, and a little bit mysterious. Our first date was at a used bookstore. He picked me up in his beat-up Volvo, which I somehow found charming rather than off-putting. We spent hours browsing the shelves, talking about our favorite authors, and debating the merits of different film directors. He bought me a first edition of The Picture of Dorian Gray, which, in retrospect, should have been a major red flag. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of romantic dates, art galleries, vintage shops, late-night coffee runs. He was incredibly attentive, always remembering small details about things I'd mentioned in passing. He wrote me poems, left me little notes, and cooked me elaborate dinners. It felt like something out of a movie. I was falling hard and fast, but there were always these unsettling undercurrents. He was intensely private about his past. Whenever I asked about his family or previous relationships, he would deflect, saying he preferred to focus on the present. He also had a strange fascination with darkness, both literally and figuratively. He loved horror movies, morbid art, and anything with a gothic aesthetic. He'd often talk about the beauty of decay, the allure of the macabre. It was intriguing at first, but it gradually started to feel off. One night, we were at his apartment, watching an old black and white film. He lived in a converted warehouse in a slightly derelict part of town. The space was filled with antique furniture, strange artifacts, and bookshelves overflowing with dark and obscure literature. During a particularly intense scene in the movie, he turned to me and said, "You know, I think people are most beautiful when they're broken." I remember feeling a shiver run down my spine. Broken? I asked, "What do you mean?" He just smiled enigmatically. Fragile, vulnerable, real. That's when you see their true essence. I tried to laugh it off, but his words lingered in my mind. It felt like he was saying something more than just a casual observation about human nature. It felt like a statement of intent. As our relationship progressed, his behavior became increasingly controlling. He started dictating what I wore, who I spent time with, and what I did with my free time. He'd get jealous if I even mentioned another man's name. He insisted that we spend every waking moment together, isolating me from my friends and family. At first, I chalked it up to passion. I told myself he was just deeply in love and didn't want to lose me. But then the jealousy turned into possessiveness, and the possessiveness turned into manipulation. He'd use guilt trips, emotional blackmail, and even threats to keep me in line. One afternoon, I was at my apartment, getting ready to go out with some friends for dinner. He called me, his voice tight with anger. "Where are you going?" he demanded. "I told you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm going out with Sarah and Emily." "I don't want you going out with them," he said. "I need you here. With me." "Julian, I haven't seen them in weeks," I said. "I'm going." There was a long pause. "If you leave," he said softly, "I don't know what I'll do." I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. I knew he was manipulating me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was capable of anything. I canceled my plans with my friends and stayed at home, waiting for him to arrive. That night, he showed up with a bouquet of flowers and a contrite apology. He swore he'd never try to control me again. He said he just loved me so much that he was afraid of losing me. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But deep down, I knew things would never be the same. The turning point came a few weeks later. We were at his apartment again, and he was drunk. He started ranting about how much he hated my friends, how they were trying to steal me away from him. He accused me of flirting with other men, of not loving him enough. I tried to calm him down, but he wouldn't listen. He grabbed my arm, his grip tightening. "You're mine," he hissed. "You belong to me." I tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. His eyes were wild, his face contorted with rage. I was terrified. "Julian, you're hurting me," I said, my voice trembling. He didn't respond. He just kept squeezing my arm, his grip becoming more and more painful. I was starting to panic. I didn't know what he was capable of. In a moment of desperation, I kicked him in the shin. He yelped in pain and released my arm. I ran out of the apartment, not stopping until I reached my own building. I spent the night huddled in my bed, crying. I couldn't believe what had happened. I couldn't believe I had let myself get into this situation. The next morning, I went to the police. I told them everything. The controlling behavior, the threats, the physical abuse. They took my statement and promised to investigate. I never heard from Julian again. He disappeared. The police couldn't find him, couldn't track him down. It was like he had vanished into thin air. Years have passed since then. I've moved on with my life, but the experience still haunts me. I still have nightmares about him, about his possessive eyes and his tightening grip. I still find myself scanning crowds, looking for his face. I've learned a lot about myself since then. I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. I've learned that I deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. And I've learned that sometimes, the most charming people are the most dangerous. I still use dating apps, but I'm much more cautious now. I pay attention to the red flags. I trust my gut. And I never, ever forget that first edition of The Picture of Dorian Gray. It serves as a constant reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface, the darkness that I almost let consume me. I still believe in love, but I know now that love shouldn't be possessive or controlling. Love should be about freedom and trust. And most importantly, love should never, ever hurt. It took a horrific experience for me to realize that, and it is a lesson that I will never forget. The world has a darkness that is unseen until one gets close enough, and some do not ever realize until it is too late. He was my nightmare, and a warning for any future relationships. Okay, so I'm Maya. Or, well, I was Maya before everything. Before I met him. Before I realized that sometimes your gut screams for a reason. Before dating apps became the enemy. I'd been single for, ever. Okay, maybe not ever, but long enough to feel like I was wearing the Forever Alone label like a cheap perfume. My friends were all coupled up, posting engagement photos and baby announcements, and I was swiping left on guys who posed with tigers or bragged about their entrepreneurial spirit. Read pyramid schemes. So, yeah, I was ready for a change. I dove headfirst into the online dating pool, convinced that this time would be different. I revamped my profile, got some decent pictures taken, thanks, Instagram filters, and started swiping with renewed enthusiasm. I even lowered my standards a little bit. That's when I matched with Alex. He was different. Not in a bad way, at first. He wasn't your typical gym rat or finance bro. He was a writer, or at least that's what he said. He had this brooding, artistic vibe that I found surprisingly attractive. He quoted poetry, talked about existentialism, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. Our conversations were stimulating, engaging, and a welcome change from the usual, hey, wanna grab coffee? We texted for a couple of weeks before finally deciding to meet up. He suggested this little hole-in-the-wall bookstore cafe downtown. It seemed quirky and cool, and I was excited. I spent hours agonizing over what to wear, finally settling on a vintage dress that I hoped struck the right balance between effortless and trying too hard. The first few dates were amazing. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, and made me feel like I was the only person in the world. He was charming, witty, and genuinely seemed to see me, not just the curated version I presented online. He'd bring me little gifts, a rare edition of my favorite book, a vintage postcard from a city I'd always dreamed of visiting, a single, perfect rose. He was attentive, romantic, and everything I thought I wanted in a partner. I fell hard, embarrassingly, head over heels, can't eat, can't sleep kind of hard. I started picturing a future with him, holidays together, meeting his family, maybe even a wedding. Looking back, I see the red flags were there all along, subtle at first, like little whispers of doubt in the back of my mind. But I was so blinded by infatuation that I ignored them, rationalized them, or simply didn't want to see them. He was secretive about his past, always vague about his family and friends. He claimed he was a lone wolf type, preferring his own company to social gatherings. He avoided taking pictures, saying he didn't like being captured. And he had this intense, almost obsessive focus on me, wanting to know everything I was doing, who I was with, and where I was going. But I chalked it up to him being a complex, introverted artist. I told myself it was endearing that he was so interested in me. I was flattered by his attention, even when it felt a little suffocating. The moment I knew something was wrong was when he started showing up unannounced. It started innocently enough. He'd happen to be in my neighborhood and suggest we grab a drink. Or he'd, accidentally, run into me at my favorite coffee shop. I thought it was cute, a sign that he was thinking about me, that he wanted to spend every possible moment together. Then it escalated. One evening, I was having dinner with my friends Sarah and Emily at this Italian place near my apartment. I hadn't seen them in weeks, and I was excited to catch up. We were laughing and gossiping, enjoying the food and the company, when I glanced up and saw Alex standing outside the restaurant, staring at me through the window. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't waving. He was just watching. His expression was unreadable, but there was something unsettling about his gaze. It felt possessive, intense, and just plain wrong. I froze, my smile faltering. Sarah and Emily noticed something was off and asked what was wrong. I stammered, trying to explain, but I didn't want to scare them. I told them it was just a friend, that I'd be right back. I excused myself and went outside. Alex was still standing there, his eyes fixed on me. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. He shrugged, feigning innocence. "Oh, hey, I was just in the area and thought I'd see if you were around." "You just happen to be in the area?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "At this restaurant? While I'm having dinner with my friends." He shifted his weight, avoiding my gaze. "Yeah, well, I missed you. I wanted to see you." I didn't buy it for a second. This wasn't a coincidence. This was something else. "Alex, you can't just show up like this," I said, my voice hardening. "I'm having dinner with my friends. I need you to leave." His expression darkened. "So, you'd rather spend time with them than with me?" "That's not the point," I said, exasperated. "I need space. I need to have a life outside of you." He stepped closer, invading my personal space. "But I am your life, Maya. We're meant to be together. I'm just trying to show you how much I care." His words sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't love. This was obsession. "Alex, please," I pleaded. "Just go." He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes burning with an intensity that scared me. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. I stood there for a few minutes, watching him disappear into the crowd, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt shaken, violated, and deeply, profoundly afraid. I went back inside and tried to act normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time the door opened, I jumped. Every time someone walked past the window, I flinched. I couldn't focus on the conversation. I couldn't eat my food. I just wanted to go home, lock the doors, and hide. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the scene in my head, over and over again. I realized that Alex's behavior wasn't romantic or endearing. It was controlling, manipulative, and potentially dangerous. I knew I had to end things. The next day, I texted him, telling him that I needed to talk. He responded immediately, eager to see me. I suggested meeting at a public park, in broad daylight, surrounded by people. I didn't want to be alone with him. When he arrived, he was wearing the same intense expression he'd had the night before. He didn't say hello. He just stared at me, waiting for me to speak. "Alex," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be in this relationship. It's not healthy." His face contorted in anger. "What are you talking about? What did I do?" "It's not about what you did," I said. "It's about who you are. You're too intense, too controlling. I need space, and you won't give it to me." He scoffed. "Space? What do you need space from?" "Me. I'm the best thing that's ever happened to you." "That's not true," I said, my voice rising. "You're suffocating me. I can't breathe." He grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "Don't say that. Don't you dare say that. I love you more than anything in the world." "Let go of me," I said, struggling to free myself. He tightened his grip. "I'm not letting you go. You're mine. You belong to me." I screamed. People turned to look. A couple walking by stopped and asked if I was okay. Alex released my arm, his eyes wide with panic. "I didn't mean to," he stammered. I just don't want to lose you." "It's over, Alex," I said, my voice shaking. "Stay away from me." I turned and ran, as fast as I could, not stopping until I reached my apartment building. I locked the doors, drew the curtains, and collapsed on the couch, sobbing. I knew I had to report him. I knew I had to protect myself. But I was terrified. What if he came after me? What if he hurt me? I spent the next few weeks living in fear, constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every sound. I changed my phone number, deleted my social media accounts, and installed a security system in my apartment. I went to the police and filed a report, but they said there wasn't much they could do without concrete evidence of harassment. They advised me to get a restraining order, which I did. I never saw Alex again, but the fear lingered, a constant reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly normal people. I still use dating apps, but I'm much more cautious now. I pay attention to the red flags, trust my gut, and never ignore the whispers of doubt in the back of my mind. Because sometimes, those whispers are screaming for a reason. Okay, so, this is hard for me to talk about. I've only told a few people bits and pieces, and I've never really put the whole story together. It's not something I'm proud of, or even something I fully understand. It just happened, and it messed me up pretty badly. It started like any other online dating story, I guess. I was in a rut, freshly single after a long, boring relationship that fizzled out more than ended. I was lonely, honestly. All my friends were coupled up, and I was tired of being the third wheel, the extra person at dinner. So, I did what everyone else does. I downloaded an app. Not Tinder, something a little more curated, I guess you could say. The kind of app where people put a little more effort into their profiles. The kind where you're supposed to be looking for something real. I don't know why I thought that would work for me, but I was grasping at straws. Anyway, I swiped and scrolled, and after a few weeks of dead-end conversations and awkward coffee dates, I matched with Liam. He seemed different. He wasn't conventionally attractive, not in that chiseled jaw, six-pack kind of way. He was kind of lanky, with a mop of dark hair that always seemed to fall in his eyes, and this quiet, almost shy smile. But there was something about his profile that drew me in. He wrote about hiking and old movies and volunteering at an animal shelter. He seemed genuine. We started messaging, and the conversation flowed so easily. He was smart, funny, and surprisingly insightful. He asked me about my hopes and dreams, my fears, the things that kept me up at night. It was like he could see right through me. And instead of being scared, I felt seen. We talked for a couple of weeks before we finally met up. He suggested a small, independent bookstore cafe. It was perfect. Cozy, quiet, filled with the smell of coffee and old paper. He was even more awkward and endearing in person. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. I remember feeling this sense of relief, like I'd finally found someone who understood me. We started seeing each other regularly after that. Hiking on weekends, movie nights at my place, volunteering at the animal shelter with him. He was kind and considerate, always putting my needs first. He remembered the little things, like my favorite flowers or the way I took my coffee. It felt easy. Too easy, maybe. I started to feel uncomfortable. Not in a bad way, but I couldn't trust it. It felt fake. A few months in, things started to shift. Slowly, subtly, but definitely. It started with little things. He'd get possessive, asking who I was texting or where I was going when I went out with my friends. He'd call or text constantly when I wasn't with him, checking in, making sure I was okay. At first, I brushed it off as him being caring, but it started to feel suffocating. Then, the jealousy started. He'd get upset if I talked about other guys, even in passing. He'd make comments about my clothes, saying they were too revealing or that I was trying to attract attention. He didn't forbid me from doing anything outright, but he made it clear that he wasn't happy when I did things that didn't involve him. I started to pull away. I made excuses to avoid seeing him, telling him I was busy with work or had plans with friends. He didn't take it well. He'd get angry, accusing me of not caring about him, of leading him on. He'd guilt-trip me, saying he'd done so much for me and that I was throwing it all away. One night, after I told him I couldn't see him because I had a work event, he showed up at my apartment unannounced. He said he'd wanted to surprise me, but his eyes were bloodshot and he smelled like alcohol. He started yelling at me, accusing me of lying, of seeing someone else. I tried to calm him down, but he wouldn't listen. He grabbed my arm, his grip tightening until it hurt. I told him to let go, but he wouldn't. I started to panic. I managed to wrench my arm free and ran to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. He started banging on the door, screaming my name, telling me to open up. I called the police, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial the number. He heard me on the phone and started kicking the door. I thought he was going to break it down. The police arrived a few minutes later and dragged him away. I pressed charges, and he got a restraining order. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. He started stalking me. He'd follow me to work, to the grocery store, to the gym. He'd park outside my apartment building, just watching. I'd see him everywhere, lurking in the shadows. I reported it to the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do unless he violated the restraining order. I was terrified. I changed my route to work, started taking self-defense classes, and installed security cameras in my apartment. I felt like I was living in a prison, constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid of what he might do. One night, I came home from work and found my apartment door unlocked. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I slowly pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was dark and silent. I reached for the light switch, my hand trembling. As soon as the light flickered on, I saw him. He was sitting on my couch, waiting for me. He smiled a slow, unsettling smile. He stood up and walked towards me. I tried to run, but he grabbed me. I don't want to go into details. It was bad, really bad. I managed to fight him off eventually, screaming and kicking until he finally let go and ran out of the apartment. I called the police again, hysterical. This time, they took me seriously. They launched a full-scale investigation and finally caught him a few days later. He was charged with multiple felonies and sentenced to several years in prison. I moved to a different city, changed my name, and started therapy. It's been years, but I still have nightmares. I still jump at sudden noises. I still struggle to trust people. I haven't been on a date since. I don't know if I ever will be. The thought of putting myself out there again, of being vulnerable, of trusting someone, it's just too much. Sometimes, I wonder if I'll ever be able to move on, if I'll ever be able to feel safe again. I try to focus on the positive, on the fact that I survived, that I'm still here. But it's hard. It's so hard. I blame myself sometimes. I think about all the red flags I ignored, all the warning signs I missed. I wonder if I could have done something differently, if I could have prevented it all from happening. But then I realized that it's not my fault. He was the one who was sick, the one who was twisted. I was just trying to find love, like everyone else. It's hard to believe in love after something like that. It's hard to believe in people. It's hard to believe in anything. I wanted to give a full and honest account of what happened. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Maybe it's because I need to get it off my chest. Maybe it's because I want to warn others, to let them know that these things can happen, even in the seemingly safe world of online dating. Just be careful. Please.